inspired 6 other photographers to donate their time and talent to work with me, and several writers, and we're doing the second one now. So but it's 8 years and going. So unless you work like an activist, it's tremendous odds. I had to literally shed sweat and tears, not blood, to make it happen and keep it going. It's an uphill task. It's very, very difficult. As there's not much money, so it's difficult, but it can happen. But you've got to be at it like an activist. Several years, you just keep, going at it. It does. Unsung has shown that actual change can really happen.
Any comment, Claire? Oh, no. In looking at all the photographs, especially in the first 3 presentations, I was particularly struck by the juxtapositions, whether they were within the photograph or one to the next. And as we all discovered today, this multi-layered city that we are all living in. How do you say examine and a photograph in a way is a snapshot that then will create these emotions or these impressions and has a political angle to it, or can have a political angle to it in terms of just by depicting a certain reality cause people to question it, or juxtapositions which are humorous. Do you go out when you're shooting in the street and when you're shooting in the city, looking specifically for these juxtapositions? How do they come up upon you? Or do you find them usually when you're working post having shot? Are there surprises that you find in the way you're looking at the city? And what have you learned from your exploration of the cities in the way, as you take your projects forward, in the surprising or the unusual or the unexpected is really where I'm going. And how does that impact your photography going forward or at the time in terms of completing a project? You may be looking for something, but you find something else. Have you come across that?
I think that as Vivek was saying, part of it is before you go out onto the street, you've got a certain thing in mind, but of course you can't really control the situation and with street photography, but in other forms you can definitely control the situation. And I think that one of the projects that I worked on is disappearing professions in urban India, and that was 4 months of research before I went and to the cities, finding out what were these traditional professions, and then going to those places. But part of it is just legwork. And, I think that photography is a lot to do with luck. Even whatever photography that you do, journalistic photography, it's you can never judge what's going to happen at an event. And so it is luck and also, the ability to then capture that and to capture in a sort of a single frame or several frames the whole story, as it were. And I think that's what goes back to what we were saying earlier. And is everyone a photographer, and are we on this stage obsolete now? And I think that technology changed, and everyone was able to take pictures, especially in India when I first started working. It was very difficult to get hold of a camera. You had to import it, and there were very few of us. Remember, Mahesh? And now, now everyone has a camera, but we still get jobs. So there's something. Why do we still get paid to do what we do? there must be something to do with the imagery that we create, which is not just pure, capturing of a moment or something.
Yeah, I don't mind. Once again, I'll try to be very brief. I think it boils down to knowing what you want to say, and I'm not very sure of that myself. But when you go out on a project, or when I go out on a project, I try to go out very well researched, and then you just trust in the moment, so to speak. And I'd like to touch upon something which is a little controversial, but there's a certain mystical act to the act of making a photograph. For example, for these photographs of the talent show, I went in with a few parameters, which is I shot at f1.8. I opened it wide open. They were all shot at like 12 noon with flashes, so on and so forth. Very high speed, a lot of filters, and with the intention of making it look almost like a dream, like the things that come to an audience or to someone in a dream, all those dark nightmares we have, which we forget about, which never enter polite conversation. So I like to have faith and trust and to feel inspired, and I mean the word inspiration comes from inspiros, to live in spirit, to be in touch with something larger, and to hope that something flows through you and helps you create something of value and meaning.
The juxtapositions, I think, see, Bangalore especially, and I'm sure most of the Indian cities are full of these contrasts, because there are a lot of villages that have come in, a lot of different things, and 10,000 things that are always happening. And especially while shooting Bangalore, something recent in the last few years, as I was shooting for my book, what was coming into my mind is that post in the first half of, first decade of 20th century rather, I think during S.M. Krishna's time, the whole buzz was to convert Bangalore into Singapore or Beijing, and I think I was one of the persons, I guess, who applauded the thought, but much later I realized that it was wrong. It was impossible to do and Bangalore had to become a Bangalore first, and not a Beijing or a Singapore. And a lot of people who had come from the US come back, we're all fueling those thoughts, and the IT barons as well. So I guess, I'm completely against that thought, and I'm very vocal about it. So I think when I did that picture of Infosys and the thing, I think these thoughts actually go act as subconscious current to make these pictures. I wish there was more politically oriented photography happening. It's not happened yet. I hope we should be able to. I'm not saying photographing politicians, but actually with the
no, I would call your pyramid picture a political picture.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, that could be the Louvre. I mean, that's those two juxtapositions,
right,
that
right.
roof of glass over the slum. It's a pretty powerful picture.
And, yeah, I mean, Infosys supported my first project, so I would still make that picture and put it on my book because I felt very, very deeply about it.
What would be interesting to know is whether Infosys would like that picture to be shown of it.
Actually, just to add to the Infosys argument, if you look at the architecture of their campus in Mysore, say, you have a very highly accomplished gentleman named Mr. Narayan Murthy, who comes from a very Brahmin background, who's set up in miniature all imperial and, if you will, some of the most imperial structures known to man from around the world, whether it's replicas of the Vatican down to the Space Center, or if you will, the Epcot Center, is that what it's called? It's all on one campus. So if you look at it from the inner life of, say, Mr. Narayan Murthy, it's interesting to see where he's got these ideas from, of putting all these larger-than-life bits of architecture on his campus, which otherwise looks like it's a bit of Palo Alto that's fallen out of the sky.
Well, and really it is a colonization of ideas that seems to be happening, or colonization of mindset. The picture sets up the mindset of whoever's observing it, you see, and you have a pleasant, nice picture, and everyone is supposed to be maybe just dumbed down a bit. And but that really then speaks to where is Bangalore going? Because if one looks at the reality, and and please, if there's anybody in the audience who wishes to ask a question, just let me know. Okay, where is it going vis-a-vis this? The juxtapositions are another anti-colonization kind of statement, and are we going to get bored of them, do you think? Or do we need more of them? Or do we, as a practice, need to figure out more interesting or experimental ways to tell our stories visually? Any thoughts on that? And then we'll go there after.
I found the question very complicated, but just maybe to cut through some of it, I have no idea, right?
Okay.
Well, I think, yeah, juxtapositions, we will get bored of it after some time, and we'll have to find new ways. It'll come out, it'll happen, it'll happen.
I'd like to ask Mahesh about Infosys' reaction to that photograph. I mean, if at all you've had any interface with them in any way.
I tried to sell some books and they never bought it.
They never bought it. Okay.
They didn't.
That explains a lot.
Yeah,
then.
I think it didn't sell at the bookstore there either.
Okay. But have you investigated why it happened, or
no, not really. I mean, all my friends there have left, so I really don't have any spies there who can tell me.
Yeah. Well, to add to that, I've seen most of your books, and I also know that it's been sponsored by some of the software companies based in Bangalore, and even in some of the introductions, you've mentioned that partly Bangalore is in such a state because of the uncurtailed growth of these software companies. So how have they reacted to it? I mean, because they're also sponsors of your books. Yeah. I mean, have you had a sort of a situation where you had to compromise with your outlook of the city, or have they been okay with it and very encouraging in your project?
No, I've never had to compromise. I'm very vocal about it, and I don't think I don't blame the IT growth at all. I think it's done good to the city because it's brought in money, and that money is now being used to promote culture because a lot of people are writing checks to various things, which is good. What I'm saying is the growth that came with that building boom, and not bothering about water. No, we never stopped by to think. Where are we getting water from? About the groundwater, about the garbage, all these kind of things. We never did. That's what that we are also responsible for it. It's not just the, I mean, to answer your question, when I was doing this book, Subrata Bagchi was a big help. I mean, he lent some of the books from his library, especially Professor Richard Florida's book on creativity and the city, which played a major part in my thought processes while photographing, and I've had discussions with him, and on all these kind of things, and he finally did buy a considerable number of books, so without any asking me to change anything, so that's the so I think I've been lucky that way.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is about archiving. It's a kind of practical question, and then I have another comment. This Delhi exhibition has these wonderful albumin prints that are still around, but so much of what's happening now is so ephemeral. Roy referred to the avalanche of photography that's been, but all of us are in this position where we don't print a lot of things anymore. Things that are wonderful that appear in blogs on the web, they disappear. Later you look, you go to the same link, it's no longer there. So in terms of, and I know this whole digital thing has created a lot of back-end work for photographers. So I just wanted to ask, since there are 4 photographers here, or 5, what ideas you all have come up with for, we're all living in smaller and smaller spaces, how you've managed to archive your stuff. I mean, we all have so much stuff these days and have very little space for it. How you, kind of create some permanence to it so you can access it again in the future. And then I have a second brief observation that the word nostalgia comes from the Greek home. A home is embedded in that. So I think nostalgia has become a sort of mode of being for Bangaloreans, at least those of us who grew up in the city. And it seems almost as we're hearkening back to some other city that no longer exists, or some past in time. And even the people who are saying we're not going to do that kind of work seem to be in a dialogue with it, in rebellion against this nostalgia. So just any responses?
Okay, to answer the first part of your question very briefly, it's called an external hard drive, and then you have to pray that it doesn't crash. And then you buy two, more or less. Many external hard drives. And if you publish on a blog, then you have the added security of having a low-res version of some of your photographs saved on some server somewhere on the planet. I think one day when archaeologists of the future look back, they're going to be looking at old servers and checking out what's on Facebook and saying, okay. So the clouds, like Vivek says. This whole idea of nostalgia is I think is limited in Bangalore. And it's limited to people who've been here for a while, a generation of two. And things are changing so fast. Topographies are changing, people are leaving. I think a lot of people who once lived in cantonment are being pushed to the edges of the city. They've sold their bungalows, they bought apartments, so on and so forth. So you have all these movements. And a lot of people identify Bangalore with their own little core group. But the city is highly compartmentalized. You have your Malleshwaram, you have your Jayanagar, you have your cantonment, you have your Richmond town, you have your Benson town, you have people on this side of the tracks, that side of the tracks. If you look at it from a historical point of view, anyone like Mahesh, I think, was saying earlier on, if you were if you were in Benson town, you were considered not really of good class, if you will. So on and so forth. If you're from Lingarajpuram, nobody talked to you. But things are changing, the boundaries are breaking, and various people are jumping over various walls, barbarians or not. So that's the city today. Nostalgia, I personally think it's fairly schizophrenic. And to be able to maintain one's center and collect oneself in the middle of all these movements does take effort.
I'll just add very quickly to what. Yeah, 1 second, please.
I'm sorry if you're from Lingarajpuram. No offense.
One of the things I find is books. Printing photographs in the form of books. Gives a longevity to it. I have photo books from 75 years ago. So 80 years ago, I guess. So and the album and prints that you have seen, and they really, so that's important. Difficult to do, but it's important. I think the society should support that. The publishing business. I think we'll talk about it a little later. That's very important. Because my books, are bought from across the world today. And archiving is going to be a big problem. Several hard disks and et cetera. That's the technical part of it. But actually making it available for the future is going to be a big problem.
And my bigger fear is just obsolescence. The stuff that I shot on a particular kind of camera and processed in a particular kind of software, that software company, or if I don't have that particular way to read it, I can't get in. Yes, yes, sir.
I was born in Bangalore in 1944. Can you hear? Yeah, I have seen the change. Can all of you do together something for the people so that they stop destruction and something happens better? What he has asked, I want to support him. You never told about how to stop the change or bring better.
Change is inevitable. So I believe I read in a history book, Kannada book, that Sir Mirza Ismail in the 30s, I believe he was crying out loud that the architecture was getting destroyed. So I guess yes. I mean, one thing is we don't have any respect for our heritage, collectively. So that's a tough task.
Ma'am, we'll get back to you. But yes, Shobha?
I would just like to make a fervent appeal to all of you to document the changing face of Bangalore when the metro comes, while the metro is coming. Because things are changing so rapidly, much more rapidly than in the last 100 years. So unless you deliberately make an effort to document what is here today and gone tomorrow, nobody will know what it was like, except, haphazardly you will have photos to show, but a deliberate effort to document the changes is required.
Yeah, actually, few weeks ago, an antique dealer told me the same thing. He said, "Sir, this metro is coming. You please shoot all this picture. It will be in big demand later."
Yeah, Vivek?
Yeah, there are already enough photographers documenting the metro. In fact, when I was with Time Out, there was a section called the Metro Watch or something similar to that. So we were encouraged to go out every week and take a photograph of the progress of the metro in different parts of the city. So I think metro is, since it's happening in today's age, I think it's a very well documented process. So nothing to worry about it. So we have the pre and the post metro very much digitized and available for you in photographs.
Yes. The gentleman in the white shirt.